The Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610 was a place where we were free from the obligations of Marvel's main Earth 616 continuity, meaning that when it came to where our heroes came from and just how they got their powers, anything was possible. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. Today we're going to dive into some of these backstories as we count down the top 10 Ultimate Marvel origins different from their original. Let's get counting. Number 10. Hulk. Bruce Banner is still the Hulk in this reality, but instead of being in the wrong place at the wrong time and ending up being exposed to gamma radiation, which would transform him into the Hulk against his will, he was a researcher working for S.H.I.E.L.D. and with the Ultimates to try and rediscover the super soldier serum. Yeah, in the Ultimates, much like in the MCU, everything is kinda connected by this one single thread, this one purpose, the super soldier serum. Bruce would believe he had uncovered the serum and decided against S.H.I.E.L.D.'s better judgment to test it on himself. This would turn him into the monster we'd come to know as the Hulk, but only when Bruce was using the serum. He could not change at will, and his transformation was not initially triggered by intense emotions or rage. However, he would then blend the actual super soldier serum formula extracted from the blood of the revived Captain America, Stephen Rogers, with the Hulk serum, which would end up resulting in his transformations becoming a permanent aspect of his DNA. Number 9. Elektra. While still super heroically fanciful, Elektra's backstory in the 1610 universe is just a touch more grounded than her 616 counterpart. Instead of her mother being murdered and dying a very violent death, she instead died of breast cancer. Elektra was not made to train in martial arts when she was young, but rather enjoyed martial arts, and so she trained in martial arts out of her own interest, with Bruce Lee acting as an inspiration for her, as a fan of his. She ended up becoming a villain all because of a fellow university student who was a jerk, the wealthy Calvin Langstrom, who tormented her at school because she was willing to stand up to him and defend others against him. Because of this, he made Elektra's life a living hell, attacking one of her friends and even hiring thugs to burn down her father's laundromat business as well as her family home. It was because of this that Elektra turned to the dark side. Frustrated that there was no justice for her or any of Langstrom's victims, no matter the crime that he committed due to his wealth and his connections, she ended up attempting to kill him, setting off on a darker path than her fellow friend and vigilante, Daredevil. At one point she's like, "Daredevil, you coming with me or are you gonna help this Langstrom guy?" And he's like, "I'm gonna help this guy?" I was like, dude, just go with Elektra. Elektra's on like she's bad, but she's trying to be good, you know what I mean? I don't know, I love bad girls. I'm like, she bad but she good. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you love this list as much as I loved writing it for you, please be sure to show us some love by giving this video a thumbs up. Also give it a thumbs up because I want to tell you more origins. And so if you give it a thumbs up, there's a better chance that'll happen. Number 8. Hawkeye. Hawkeye is actually a lot more mysterious in the Ultimate Universe than the version we have from the main continuity comics. It's even been implied before that Clint Barton might not actually be Hawkeye's true name, but even an alias from the name he was given at birth. So mysterious. Instead of being someone who picked up his skills from swordsmen around the carnival circuit, Hawkeye was a former Olympic archer turned Black Ops agent who worked for S.H.I.E.L.D. The Earth 1610 story from Hawkeye more mirrors his MCU story, where he ends up settling down and having a family, but tragically in the Ultimate Universe, when the Ultimates are betrayed by fellow member Black Widow, Hawkeye's family is killed and he is kidnapped, tormented, and interrogated by Natasha's true allies. Don't worry though, he manages to escape. Thank goodness. With only his fingernails as weapons. That's how you know you're cool, if you can just fight with fingernails. I don't think I could ever do that, although mine are pretty sharp, so maybe. Number 7. Bucky Barnes. As opposed to being the camp's mascot like he was in the golden age of Marvel Comics, Bucky here was a young friend of Steve's who joined him on his journey in the military working as a press photographer. Makes sense. Bucky would not go missing before Steve, or actually go missing at all. Instead, it would be Steve who went MIA and was presumed dead, and Bucky who had to live with this and move on. Bucky Barnes would not become the Winter Soldier, but instead would live a relatively normal life, returning home and bonding with Roger's fiancée Gale. In fact, the two grew so close that they ended up in a romantic relationship, and Buck would marry Gale instead. By the time Steve returns from the ice, Barnes is now an old man. I like this reality where like Bucky just gets to grow up and like have a normal life. It's pretty cool. Number 6. Black Widow. In the reality of Earth 1610, Black Widow never truly reformed, but instead was a spy and villain the whole time. Gasp! It turned out that she was a double agent who was only pretending to serve the interests of the United States. While posing as one of their heroes, she was actually still loyal to Russia and the antagonistic team known as the Liberators, of which she was also secretly a member. Shh, don't tell anyone. Her goal was to destroy the Ultimates, and after winning over their trust and even becoming engaged to Iron Man, she betrayed the Ultimates and turned on them, revealing her true colors. Of course, she may have revealed those true colors a little too soon, as Iron Man easily apprehended her and turned her over to the authorities, but not before she could kill his butler Jarvis in cold blood. R.I.P. Jarvis. Number 5. SpiderMan. While Peter Parker's story was not too different from his 616 counterpart, he wouldn't end up being the only Spider-Man in the Earth of 1610, and in fact Peter would eventually leave the mantle, passing it on to someone in his place. Someone new and very different from our Earth 616 Spidey. Yep, we are talking about the beloved Miles Morales. Miles was introduced in the Ultimate Universe and became such a fan favorite that he ended up moving over to Earth 616. Even after the Ultimate line was ended. Miles' backstory was that he was a teenage kid who was bit by a genetically enhanced spider exposed to the Oz formula while he was visiting his criminal uncle Aaron Davis. Miles was your average, awkward, but lovable hero who happened to be a teenager caught in the middle somewhat of family drama, with his uncle being a criminal and his dad Jefferson drawn into crime alongside his brother Aaron, who ended up working in secret as Fury's eyes and ears in the criminal world, but then later decided to leave it all behind and become a police officer instead. Number 4. Valkyrie. Valkyrie had a very different story than our 616 counterpart. Instead of being an Asgardian inhabiting the body of Barbara Norris, who we know as Brunhilde, she was just Barbara Norris, a 19-year-old girl who was basically obsessed with superheroes, but who had no powers of her own. She was a big Thor fan, and so she kinda decided to imitate his look, dressing up like a scantily clad, sort of Norse goddess or warrior. Barbara did have some skills as a martial artist in training, but was not nearly as experienced as she claimed to be. She wouldn't receive powers until Loki tricked her and her team, the Defenders, into pledging loyalty to him in exchange for said powers. They did not know that Loki was Loki at the time. Valkyrie's gifted powers would grant her superhuman strength, durability, and would allow her to fly. Number 3. Iron Man. Iron Man's initial backstory, which got retconned into just being basically a weird anime show, was a lot different than his 616 counterpart. I know that technically this is no longer canon in terms of his backstory within the 1610 universe, as instead his initial origins was moved over to Earth 55921, but before that happened, before it was retconned away, it was canon in the 1610 universe, and I like to remind everyone of just how gloriously bizarre it was. So here we go. Orson Scott Card was the writer behind the series, a sci-fi writer who you might recognize the name of, as he is the author of many other acclaimed science fiction works such as Ender's Game, which if you are like me, you read Ender's Game in school and you were like, this book's actually pretty good. I don't know if that's what happened to you, but that was my story. I feel like that's actually maybe why I like sci-fi today. That might have been the beginning. Maybe. That and Stargate. The Ultimate Iron Man series, however, ended up being a little too out there for comic book fans in terms of what it offered when it came to shaking up Tony's origins. Shook it up a little too much. Tony here was a child who was altered while in his mother's womb by a lab accident. He ended up being born with neural tissue all over him, which made him extremely sensitive to the world around him, but also made him hyper intelligent. His father Howard would create a liquid suit to protect his son from the world he was so sensitive to, but this suit would have its drawbacks and would also make Tony appear blue. So there you go. Number 2. Nick Fury. Nick Fury was changed quite a bit in the Ultimate Universe. This is 616 Nick Fury, a former World War II soldier turned super spy whose life was saved by the Infinity Formula. This is 1610 Nick Fury, a former World War II soldier who worked alongside Wilson Fisk's grandfather and Wolverine at the time, but who was taken in by the US military and forcibly experimented on as part of Project Rebirth. In fact, this version of Nick Fury from the Ultimate Universe has an origin story that kind of echoes that of Isaiah Bradley of Earth 616, one of the first super soldiers. In fact, I believe his origins came out only a few years prior to this Origins, which was added in sort of later. 2008 we got it for Nick Fury, and I think for Isaiah we got it like I want to say 2003? 1610 Nick Fury would be altered by the serum he was given, which of course was the super soldier serum, but he would use his enhanced strength and abilities to help his fellow prisoners escape. This version of Fury was also modeled after Samuel L. Jackson, who would later end up being promised a part in potential future films, in order to help make amends after Jackson noticed that Marvel had basically used his likeness in the Ultimate Universe without asking him first. But don't worry, it all worked out. No one got really mad, I don't think, about it, so yay. Number 1. Black Knight. Dane Whitman has such a random story in the Ultimate Universe. In the main continuity, he is a more medieval feeling hero who fights with an ancient cursed sword that causes him to kinda lose sanity and become more rabid almost each time he uses it. In the Ultimate Universe, he became more machine than man. Originally, he was a man who served in the military but became a quadriplegic after saving his fellow soldiers in battle. He would then become more of a mech with a human mind, but was considered too insane to actually be used for the team that he'd been recruited on, the West Coast Ultimates. As a result, he spent much of his life inside a stasis tube until he was intended to be used as a weapon against the Ultimates during the events of Earth's 1610 Civil War story. Such a random story. What does this have to do with Black Knight at all? From 616, I don't know. Who are your favorite characters from the Ultimate Universe? Which origins do you think are the most different from the main continuity? Are there any origins that you think are too different or alternatively too similar? Let us know in the comments below. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I am your host Amanda McKnight, saying thank you so much for watching and reminding you as always to stay nerdy, YouTube. It's really bothering me that I wrote Steven with a PH, even though I know no one's gonna see that except for me. It's with a V, Amanda. Why did you write a PH, Steven? Misspelling Steven Rogers' name bothers me. Steve Rogers. Okay, that's all I have to say. Let's keep going.